Come on down here with me a minute. Mind the step, let your eyes settle. There. Look up. See them hanging there in the cool dark, the hams, the bacon, the long dark strips turning slow on their strings. Some of that meat has been hanging in this smokehouse since last winter. A whole year. No ice, no freezer, no plug in the wall. And when I take a strip of it down tonight and slice into it, it's going to be rich and deep and better. I mean this, better than any jerky you ever chewed in your life. That's not a boast. That's just the old way finally paying you back. Now we've come a long road together, you and I. Up in the kitchen we put the herbs by, the taste of July folded into a jar of salt. Then down in the cellar we kept a sack of onions, firm and sweet, clear to spring. And last time we did the hardest thing in the whole garden. We put up the tomatoes, canned and dried, and the green ones wrapped in newspaper to ripen slow for Christmas. If you missed any of those, go back for them, because it is all one idea, the same idea, and today we come to the top of the mountain. Today we do the meat. And I'll tell you plain why the meat is the top of the mountain, because this is the one nobody believes. A person will nod along about drying an herb or keeping an onion, but tell them you can keep pork and beef through a whole year, real meat, on a shelf, in the open air, no refrigeration at all, and they look at you like you've lost your mind. They think meat and they think of a chicken left out on the counter on a summer afternoon, gone bad by supper, dangerous. And they are not wrong to be careful. Meat done wrong will hurt you. And I am going to be honest with you about that every single step of the way. More honest than I've been about anything, because this is the one where honesty matters most. But meat done right, the old, plain, proven right way, kept your great-great-grandparents fed through every winter there ever was, for every century before there was a freezer to plug in. They didn't have a choice. And because they didn't have a choice, they got very, very good at it. Stay with me all the way to the third method, because the third one is the one you really came for, the one that beats jerky so bad you'll never buy a bag of it again. But first, same as always, I've got to fix one thing in your head, because it's the very thing that stops most folks before they start. You do not keep fresh meat fresh. Nobody does. That's not what's happening on these strings. What we do, what my grandmother did, what her mother did before her, is we change the meat's form. We take that soft, wet, perishable thing and we turn it into something the rot can't live in. And once you stop trying to keep the meat fresh and you start putting it up instead, the whole thing stops being scary and starts being simple. So let's name the enemy one more time, because it's the same enemy it's always been. What makes meat go bad is tiny life, bacteria growing in it. And that little life needs three things to grow. It needs water, it needs warmth, and it needs time. That's the whole of it. Every single method I'm about to give you does nothing but take one of those three things away. Take the water out, and it can't grow. Keep it cold enough, and it can't grow. And salt, good plain salt, pulls the water right out from under it and poisons the well besides. That's the secret. That's the entire secret of every cured ham and every dried strip that ever hung in a smokehouse. Salt, air, and time, working against water, warmth, and rot. Once you see it that way, you'll never be afraid of it again. 3 ways. Let me give you all 3. The first way, and the mother of all the others, is salt. Salt curing. This is the foundation, and if you learn nothing else today, learn this one, because every other method sits on top of it. Here is what salt does, and it's a small miracle you can watch happen with your own eyes. You pack a piece of meat in salt, and the salt draws the water out of it, pulls it right out through the flesh, and at the same time the salt soaks in and takes the water's place. And a thing packed in salt is a thing where the rot simply cannot get a foothold, because you've taken away the water it drinks, and you've made the whole place too harsh for it to live. It's the same law as the dried herb, the same law as everything. No water, no rot, only here the salt does the drying for you, deep, all the way through. Now there are 2 plain ways to do it, and both are old as the hills. The first is a dry cure. You take your meat, a ham, a side of bacon, a slab of pork belly, and you rub it all over, heavy, with salt. A good handful of salt, some brown sugar folded in if you like, worked into every surface. Then you lay it in a crock or a wooden box, skin down, and you cover it over and you set it somewhere cold. Cold matters here. Right around the temperature of a good root cellar, cool but not freezing, and you leave it. Days for a small piece, weeks for a ham, about a week for every couple pounds of thickness. That's the old rule of thumb. The salt goes to work, pulls the water out, and after a while you've got a firm, dense, salted piece of meat that will keep for months hung in the cold and the dark. That is your country ham. That is your salt pork, the little white block that flavored a whole winter of beans and greens in poor kitchens across this whole country. A barrel of salt pork was survival, plain and simple. The second way with salt is a wet cure, a brine. Instead of packing it dry, you make up a strong salt water, strong enough near to float an egg, sweeten it a little, and you sink your meat down in it and hold it under, cold, for a good stretch of days. That's your corned beef. That's the brisket that comes out pink and tender. Same salt, same enemy driven out, just carried in water instead of packed on dry. Some folks find the brine easier and gentler, especially for beef, and it's a fine place for a beginner to start. And now I have to stop and be honest with you, because I promised I would. And this is the most important honest word in the whole video, so don't you dare skip it. When you cure meat that's going to be kept a long while and eaten without cooking all the way through, your hams, your bacons, your dry sausages, the old-timers used and the careful people today still use, a special curing salt. You'll see it sold as pink curing salt or cure number 1, and it's got a little nitrite in it. And I know the minute I say that word, half of you flinch. Hear me out, because this is exactly where honesty earns its keep. That little bit of curing salt does one thing that plain salt alone doesn't do quite so surely. It protects against the one truly dangerous thing that can grow in a cured meat with no air, a poison you cannot see, cannot smell, cannot taste, that grows without oxygen. Plain salt and a proper cold cure will hold most things, but for the long-kept, low-oxygen cures, the hanging hams, the packed sausages, that pinch of curing salt is your seatbelt, and I will not stand here and tell you to skip your seatbelt. Use it in the exact small amount the recipe calls for and not a speck more, and you get the safety the old smoke and salt gave without having to guess. That's the honest catch, and now you know it, and knowing it is what makes you safe. A person who respects the meat gets to eat the meat all winter. A person who gets proud and careless does not. Simple as that. All right? That's salt. Now the second way, and it's the one that fills a whole yard with the best smell God ever made. Smoke. The smokehouse. Now understand, smoke almost never works alone. Smoke is salt's partner. You salt the meat first, always, to pull the water and drive out the rot, and then you hang it in the smoke to finish the job and seal the deal. And smoke does 3 good things at once. It dries the surface down hard into a skin the bugs can't cross. It lays a coat of its own natural preserving substances all over the meat, the same reason a smoked thing lasts and a fresh thing doesn't. And it gives you that deep, dark, wonderful flavor that no other thing on earth can give. A ham that's been salted and then hung in cool wood smoke for days will keep. Hung in the cold the better part of a year and taste like heaven the whole way down. There are 2 kinds of smoking, and it's worth knowing the difference, because it's the difference between a keeper and a supper. Hot smoking cooks the meat as it smokes it. That's your smoked sausage, your smoked fish you eat that week. It's delicious. But a hot smoked, cooked thing isn't a long keeper. It's cooked meat, and it'll spoil like cooked meat. Cold smoking is the old preserving way. You keep the smoke cool, well away from any real heat, so the meat never cooks. It just slowly dries and takes on the smoke over days and days. Down in a proper smokehouse or a cool smoke shed with the fire set far off and the smoke drawn in cool. That's what makes the ham that hangs a year. Cold smoke to keep it, hot smoke to eat it, and now you know which is which, and most folks never do. And I'll be honest here too, plainer and shorter this time. A smokehouse is a real project, more than a jar and a spoon, but it does not have to be grand. My grandfather's was a little board shed no bigger than an outhouse, with a fire pit dug outside and a pipe running the cool smoke in low. Folks build them out of an old barrel, an old refrigerator with the guts pulled out, a scrap wood box. It's the oldest, humblest building on the place, and it fed the family better than the finest kitchen in town. If a smokehouse is more than you're ready for this year, that's all right. The salt cure stands fine on its own. And the third method I'm about to give you needs no smoke and no fire at all. Which brings us right to it. Because now we come to the third way. The one you came for. The one that beats jerky so badly you'll be almost angry nobody told you sooner. And this one uses no smoke, no fire, no heat at all. Just salt, a little vinegar, some spice, and moving air. This is Biltong. This is air-dried meat. The way it's been done on hot, dry lands for hundreds of years. And once you've had it, you are done with jerky forever. Now let me tell you the difference, because it is the whole thing. Jerky, store jerky, most jerky is cooked. It's dried out with heat, cooked hard and dry. And that heat squeezes the life and the flavor right out of it and leaves you chewing on a salty board. Biltong is not cooked, not 1 degree. Biltong is cured raw with salt and vinegar, and then hung in moving air to dry slow and cool, all the way through, on its own. And because it's never cooked, it stays rich and beefy and tender enough to bite clean through. It tastes like the very best of the meat, concentrated down, instead of like the meat's punished ghost. That's why I say better than jerky. It's not close. And here is the whole of it, and it's so simple you'll laugh. You take a good lean cut of beef, a nice piece off the round is perfect, and you slice it into strips along the grain, about a finger thick. You lay those strips in a dish and you douse them good with vinegar, plain brown vinegar, and you salt them heavy, and you press on your spice. The old recipe is coarse salt, cracked black pepper, and toasted coriander seed, and it is perfect and I wouldn't change it. You let that sit a few hours, turning it once while the vinegar and salt do their work, the salt pulling water and setting the meat, the vinegar souring the surface so nothing can grow on it. Then you take each strip and you hang it up, on a hook, on a clean wire. A clothes drying rack does fine, somewhere cool and dry with air moving past it. Not in the sun, not by a heat, just moving. A spare room, a pantry, a porch out of the weather with a little fan set to stir the air, that's all it wants. And then you wait. 3 days, 5 days, a week, depending on how thick you cut it and how dry your air is. You want it dried down firm all the way through if you mean to keep it a long while. Some like it a little soft in the middle to eat that week, but for keeping, dry it through. And what you pull off that string is the finest preserved meat in the whole world, dark and dense and rich, keeping for weeks and weeks on a shelf in a cloth bag or a jar with a bit of air to it. Months, if you dried it hard and keep it cool and dry. A pocket full of it will walk a man across a whole day of work and never spoil in the heat. It is the perfect food, and it costs you a cheap cut of beef, a splash of vinegar, and a little patience. That is the third way. That is the one that makes people's eyes go wide. And there's not a bag of jerky on any gas station shelf in this country that can stand in the same room with it. Now let me back up and fill in the details that make it all actually work, because I gave you the bones, and you deserve the rest. First, a word on which meat, because it matters as much here as which onion or which tomato mattered before. For all of this drying and curing, lean is your friend and fat is your enemy. I mean fat that's worked all through the meat. Fat doesn't dry, and fat can go rancid and turn on you over the months. So for biltong, for dried strips, for the long keepers, you want good lean muscle, off the round, off the loin, with the fat trimmed off the outside. Now a whole ham or a bacon is different. There the fat's part of it, and the salt cure and the smoke protect it. But for the air dried and the long hung, trim your fat and dry your lean. Right cut, right job. Same as the paste tomato, same as the storing onion. It's always about matching the piece to the plant. Second, temperature, because it's the quiet thing that decides everything. All of this old work was done in the cool. The late fall, the winter, the cool cellar, the cool smoke. That is not an accident. You cure and you dry in the cool, because in the cool the rot moves slow and your salt and your air have time to win the race. The old-timers butchered in the late fall for exactly this reason. Cold coming on, flies gone, the whole world turned into a walk-in cooler for free. Try to dry a strip of meat in a hot, wet, still August kitchen, and you are asking the rot to win. Do it in the cool, dry, moving air of the fall and the winter, or make yourself a cool, dry corner, and you'll succeed near every time. Cool and dry and moving air. Write that on your hand. And third, a little bonus method, an old one and a beautiful one because it fills a gap the others don't. It's called potting, or in the fine kitchens they call it confit, but the poor farm wife called it potting, and she'd been doing it long before the fancy word came over. Here's the whole idea. Fat, sealed tight, keeps air away, and no air means no spoiling. So you take meat, a bit of pork, a duck, a goose, cooked slow and gentle in its own fat until it's tender, and you pack it down into a crock, and you pour that melted fat over the top until the meat is drowned and sealed under a solid cap of it. And under that seal of fat, kept cool, that meat keeps for months. You cut down through the fat, take what you need, smooth it back over, and it holds. It's how a family kept the good bits of the hog and the fowl through the winter, rich and ready, in a crock in the cellar. No water can get in, no air can get in, and the rot just sits outside the fat and starves. Same old law, dressed up in lard. Let me tell you about hog killing day at my grandfather's place, because it's where all of this lived, and it'll show you what it really is. It came in the late fall, always, on the first good hard cold, a day the whole family and half the neighbors turned out for, because it was too big a job for any one house alone, And so you did yours, and then you went and did theirs. It was a long, hard, cold, bloody day. I won't pretty it up. But it was also one of the most alive days of the whole year. Every single part of that animal had a place to go and a job to do, and nothing, I mean nothing, was wasted. The hams and the sides went into the salt, packed down in the big crocks. The bellies to bacon. The trimmings and the good lean got ground and spiced for sausage, some to smoke, some to pack in fat. The best cuts hung to age in the cold shed. And by the end of that one terrible, wonderful day, a family had its meat for the whole year ahead, hanging and packed and put up pork and sausage and ham enough to see every one of them through to spring. All of it out of one cold day's hard work and a barrel of salt and a shed full of smoke. Nobody called it work. It was just what you did when the cold came, so that the cold wouldn't find you empty. And all winter long, every ham you cut and every strip you pulled down had that whole loud cold day of family inside it. That's what a smokehouse full of meat really is. It's not just food. It's a whole year's security, hanging there in the dark, paid for, and waiting. Now let me settle your nerves on the safety, plain and complete, because I have talked about it in pieces, and you deserve it all in one place, and because this is the one where I will never, ever leave out the catch. Here are the rules, and they are not hard, and if you keep them, you are safe. Keep it cool. Do your curing and your drying in the cool. Cellar cool, fall cool, never in summer heat. The cold is half your safety. Use enough salt, and for the long, low-air cures, use the proper curing salt in the exact small measure the recipe gives, not less, which isn't safe, and not more, which isn't good for you. That pinch is your seatbelt against the one poison you can't see. Wear it. Keep it clean. Clean hands, clean crocs, clean knives, clean water. Dirt is where trouble starts. And last, the rule you never break. Same as with every jar we've ever put up. When you go to eat a thing you've kept, you look at it and you smell it first. If it's slimy, if it smells sour and wrong, if it's got a fuzzy mold that isn't the good white bloom a cured ham is supposed to wear, if anything about it tells you no, you throw it out. And you don't argue with yourself about it. A cheap cut of meat is not worth your health. Not ever. That almost never happens when you've kept it cool and salted it right. But you use your head and never your pride. When in doubt, throw it out. That's not fear. That's just respect for the meat and for yourself. And it is exactly why we salt it and cool it and cure it careful in the first place. Do it right, and cured meat is one of the oldest, safest, surest foods there ever was. Whole civilizations crossed whole oceans on salted meat. You can keep a winter's worth on a shelf. Now let me put the stakes on it, plain, the way I have all along. Meat is the dearest thing in the whole grocery cart. You know it. You feel it every time you check out. And what does a family do to keep it? They buy a big freezer, they fill it, and they pay the electric company every single month, year in and year out, to keep that meat from rotting. And they'd better pray the power holds, because when the grid goes down for 3 days in an ice storm, that whole freezer of meat, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of it, turns to garbage in the dark, all at once, and there's not a thing they can do but watch it go. A cured ham hanging in the smokehouse does not care one bit if the power's out. Salt pork in a crock does not blink at a blackout. Biltong on a string keeps right through the storm. For the price of some salt, a little vinegar, and a cool, dry corner, you take your family's meat off the grid and out of the reach of every outage and every rate hike there ever will be. That's real security. That's hundreds of dollars kept, and worry set down, and a kind of freedom the freezer never gave you, because the freezer owns you a little, and the smokehouse owns you not at all. Now let me lay all three out plain, so you have them clean. Number 1, salt it. Pack it dry in salt for a ham or salt pork, or sink it in a strong cold brine for corned beef. Salt pulls the water and drives out the rot, cold and dark, and it keeps for months. And for the long low-air cures, wear your seatbelt, the proper curing salt, the exact small amount. Number 2, smoke it. Salt it first, always, then hang it in cool wood smoke, cold smoke to keep it, hot smoke to eat it. The smoke dries it hard, seals it, and gives it that flavor nothing else on earth can. A salted, cold-smoked ham hangs near a year. Number 3, air dry it. Biltong. Salt and vinegar and spice on lean strips, then hung in cool moving air till it's dried through. No heat, no smoke, never cooked, and better than any jerky that was ever made. Weeks and months on a shelf, rich the whole way down. And every one of them, same as the herbs, same as the onions, same as the tomatoes, is just you understanding the enemy and taking away what it needs. The water salted and dried out of it, the warmth kept off it with the cool, the air sealed away under fat or driven off by smoke. That is all it ever is. That is all it was ever going to be. So look what you built now, over these 4 times together. You've got the herbs to season every pot, the onions to start every meal, the tomatoes to fill it out, and now the meat, the ham and the bacon and the sausage and the biltong, to make it a real supper, a whole one, that a family can sit down to in the dead of February with the snow to the windowsills and never once need a store or a freezer or a line coming in from the road. That is a pantry standing on its own 2 feet. That is a household that cannot be starved out by a storm or a bill or a bare shelf in town. And you built it out of the seasons, with salt and smoke and cool moving air, and not $1 a month to anybody. And all of this, every bit of it, the herbs, the onions, the tomatoes, and the meat, it's all the one idea, and my friends Amos and Rebecca gathered all 90 of these old methods into that almanac I keep telling you about. The whole pantry in order, the salting and the smoking and the drying, the cellar and the crocks, with the materials laid out and what each thing costs, and just what it saves you against the store. If these have been good to you, the rest of it is waiting for you down in the description. There's no hurry on any of it. Everything worth keeping keeps. But we're not quite done, you and I, because I told you meat could keep a year, and it can, and that's a marvel. But there's a way, an old, hard, brilliant way, to keep meat not for months, not for a year, but for years. Meat you could set on a shelf and forget and dig out 5, 10 winters later and eat, the way the old scouts and the old trappers carried their whole strength across a continent in a little dark cake in a bag. That's the next one, and it is the most astonishing of them all, and folks flat refuse to believe it until they see it. So don't you wander off. I'll have it ready for you next time. For now, this fall when the cold comes on, don't you let your meat rot and don't you hand it all over to a machine that fails you in the first storm. Salt it, smoke it, hang it in the air, put your meat up the old proven way, and come sit down to a slice of your own cured ham in the deep of the winter and pull a strip of your own biltong off the string and think of me. I'll see you at the next one. Take care of yourselves now and put it up.